waterworks doesn't own that water. My farm family in Stowe County doesn't own that water. My friends who farm in Cerro County don't own it. Factories who have a permit to discharge into it don't own it. We all own it. And when it's degraded, we all have a common interest in fighting for its protection. I think there's some folks. Again, CCI has been a leader in reminding folks who are elected and sit on Capitol Hill of that reality, and I thank CCI for doing that. But it's absolutely critical that we remind elected leaders in particular that they have a responsibility to protect our rivers, streams, and lakes. Well, let's kind of cut through the chase. We know that nitrogen and nitrogen fertilizers are a huge source of it. We know, without doubt, that the farm tiles are accelerating the quantity and degrading the quality of water that we're getting. In my view, looking at taxation on farm tile systems, and certainly looking at why we even apply nitrogen in the fall, or why, if we feel we have to apply nitrogen in the fall, we don't put some stabilizer in there that time releases it. Those are important issues that I think you and I need to ask of our policymakers, because you're spending a lot of money to clean that water. And we can do it, and we'll do it, right, Carter? But it's expensive, and someday we're going to have a nitrogen plume that is too big for us to be able to take care of. And building more of the world's largest nitrate removal facilities isn't the way to tackle that problem. You want to go to the root cause. And I appreciate the point about the Koch brothers. I, about 2 months ago, 6 weeks ago, met with the soybean growers at their invitation. They were getting a little riled up that we were talking about farm pollution being a problem. And I got to tell you, the crowd was about a third the size of in here. But Koch Industries from beautiful Wichita, Kansas had 5 representatives in that room. So there's some real vested interests in the status quo out there. And I don't mean to sound like some wacko conspiracy person. But you know, you don't have to be too wacko to realize that there are some folks who are making a lot of money off the current system. Thank you very much. The question is, in this world of who's polluting, who's contributing to this, is there any good data out there? And I did not go into any great length of discussion about the Iowa nutrient reduction strategy. And that's a strategy of voluntary conservation. Behind that policy issue, that policy concern, that policy dead end, from my view, is some good data, some good research. And the good research essentially says this: the nutrient problem in Iowa is 80 or 85% agriculture and 15 or 20% other polluters. And it could be you and me putting lawn fertilizer out on our lawn, or it could be a sewage treatment plant that discharges into the Des Moines or Raccoon River. But that basic mixture of 85-15, I think, is a fair and a good number, and that's coming out of folks who are funded by the Koch brothers and others at Iowa State University. There's some good, but there's still some good research that comes out that essentially points to that. So assume it's an 85-15 mix. I will tell you that 15% that's coming from us, pretty highly regulated. You're paying really high sewer rates to deal with the point source discharge into the Des Moines River. When in fact, and there are a few of us in this room who know this as fact, that's my background, within 1,000 feet, all that money you put into cleaning water that's discharged into the Des Moines River is repolluted by the base level pollutants that are in the Des Moines River. So you're essentially spending a lot of money for really no overall improvement in the water quality, because there's this overwhelming curtain of runoff that really isn't from urban uses. You know, I think the question is, there's been threats made by me, incidentally, about suing state or federal officials for failing to follow the Clean Water Act. The soybean growers didn't flap on that one. Reality is that that's still something that we're considering. I think we're past the point now of threatening. we really need to get down to the brass tacks of doing that if we're going to do it. But for you in CCI, your activism, your petitions, your talking with state and federal legislators, I think very important, local leaders. There has to be a multi-pronged way of dealing with this. My responsibility at the end of the day is to deliver safe drinking water to you. I think that that responsibility is being undercut deliberately by state leadership.
Yes.
I say that not with pride and not with any kind of mission accomplished sense to it. I think it's a tragedy that we reach that point where we have to sue our own leadership.
Yeah.
But that's seriously something that we're considering as an entity. If it protects our source waters, we're going to find the best legal avenue to do that. But legislatively, there are a number of things that you all should be working on. We look forward to working with CCI and the legislature. We've talked at all levels of the state government and with the regional EPA director. We did not go around the regional EPA director. When we go to DC, we actually talked with the person who's responsible for Iowa. And realistically did not find that to be very satisfactory. So for us, the legal mechanism is in place. We're looking at what, frankly, the best source of legal challenge is.
I think one of the bases of the problems now is starting with Earl Butt's policies in the 70s and the actions of the ethanol industry, Tyson Foods, Archer Daniels Midlands, and others. ConAgra really kind of control farmers today on these factory farms and so forth. So farmers today don't really take care of the soil. My criticism is, don't you think farmers today really are controlled by those interests? And they're mining and ruining the soil now for temporary interests from those groups.
Our federal farm policies are so out of whack. You are subsidizing this black serpent you saw. That drainage tile is in large degree subsidized by you. At the same time, we're incenting people to take their crops out of the crop protection program, do more tilling of soils that shouldn't be planted, and ensuring against any loss associated with that fallacy. So we have flood insurance, we have farm income insurance, we have a number of the infrastructure things like drainage tile that are subsidized by you. And it's all creating an avenue of more chemicals coming to your city and your region that have to be treated. You know, setting all that aside, if you were to, you know, I lived in Wisconsin, I lived in Illinois, lived in Louisiana, and I got to tell you, I don't see a basic difference between the economy in the state of Illinois and the economy in the state of Iowa. But in Illinois, they're a lot more protective of buffer zones to protect against sheet runoff and farm runoff going directly into waterways. We have a real interest in working with CCI and others to advocate for better soil conservation, knowing that when we have better soil conservation, the chemicals that are put on the soil will stay where they're supposed to, on the soils and on the farmland and not in your water. Great point, John. The question is, what can we do on the legislative front to really advocate for clean water? And I think there are probably 3 or 4 issues that are important to me. One of them is to provide enough funding so DNR on the livestock side, as an example, can adequately inspect. I also believe that either banning or restricting fall application of nitrogen is very important. And the point there is, and again, I come from this background, we want to put a lot of nitrogen on the field in the fall because we're concerned about whether we're going to be able to get out there in the spring and apply it. I understand that concern, I appreciate that concern, but we also need to be attentive of the water quality concerns in doing that, and there's stabilizing agents that can be put in there to time release that so that it doesn't all come in a flush. So if that really has to be done, then perhaps it should be done in a different way. So nitrogen application is going to be an important issue. Again, I believe that black serpent you saw has to be dealt with. And that's a way to tax the polluters, in my view, and to provide funding for a number of other clean water initiatives that are underfunded. And at the end of the day, we need to remind office holders that the Iowa Code specifically says that water is publicly owned. It's commonwealth of all of us. We need to exercise leadership in protecting that through nutrient runoff, whether it's from farms or from urban polluters. But whistling in the dark and pretending that a voluntary process is going to address that just doesn't work. I'm a great believer in petitions. I'm a great believer that presenting those to elected politicians at the federal and the state level, and the federal, the local, the state, and the federal level are going to be very important. So getting out there, talking in your neighborhoods, talking in your voluntary associations. Haven't talked about the importance of advocacy through groups like CCI or the IKES or Ducks Unlimited. There are a number of folks, but that kind of advocacy, very important. We haven't talked about a phenomenon out there that most of us as city folks probably don't realize, but something called drainage districts.
Yes.
There are a lot of drainage districts out there that bring farmers together and build common things like culverts, tiling systems that bring water to their sources. We believe that regulating those drainage districts is an important step forward in taking care of water quality in Iowa. So working locally, working at the state level on a number of the initiatives we've talked about, I think is very important. But going out, talking with folks, keeping this alive in the media. Realistically, you know, we've got media here tonight. The Des Moines Register, CCI have done a great job about keeping clean water as a priority out there in the media. Otherwise, it's going to die, because we're not going to have this nitrate problem for X number of months again at that level. The issue will pass if you let it pass. But if you remind folks, go out there and look at those rivers, and you don't have to be a chemist, and you don't have to take a water test to look at that water and know that's full of soil, it's full of pollutants, and it's unacceptable. Our waters in Iowa are unacceptable. We need to keep that message moving forward.